control and certainty are inversely proportional in your career.
Hey, with Jay. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast, presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, podcasting due to Hippo Direct, and you can reach me at max@hippodirect.com to help bring your podcast to life and use it as a business building tool. This is episode 109, and today's guest is Jay Acunzo. Jay is the founder of Marketing Showrunners, an awesome media and education company who puts together some amazing podcasting workshops, I must say. And he is the author of Break the Wheel, all about questioning best practices, and of course, a very popular keynote speaker. Jay knows a ton about creativity, storytelling, and practicing. Yes, practice, practice, practice. His podcast, Unthinkable, is unthinkably good, and he has created dozens of other podcasts and original works and just has such a knack for original narrative storytelling. It's the J.A. Kid. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Jay Acunzo, my favorite Acunzo and the founder of Marketing Showrunners. Jay, how you doing today?
Good. I got to tell all my family you said that. They'll be jealous.
Yeah, they're up there. Well, they're right up there as well. You're in the top 5 to 10, depending on how extended you want to go.
If you met my daughter, who's about 18 months old, you'd quickly drop me and replace her with that title. And that has been the case across all of my family and friends. So I'm no longer the star of this picture.
So, Jay, thank you so much for joining today. We're going to get a lot into the amazing stories that you create with some just awesome brands out there and your very unique narrative approach to content creation and storytelling. But before we get into that, very early in your career, you were at Google. And I think that is an accomplishment in itself. I mean, there's so many people out there in the business space and the tech space, even beyond, who it's a dream for them to be at Google one day. It's such a highly desired company. It's, there's literally been movies about it. There's endless stories about it. It's probably the most common homepage out there. Why did you leave Google?
Yeah, I really enjoy talking about my time there, not because I like talking about the fact that I worked for a well-known company, but because I like pointing out to people how much I disliked it. Because I think there is this narrative that a lot of people have, and maybe it's from their upbringing, maybe from school. Mine was kind of a bit of both. But you take the right classes, go to the right school, get the grades, join the extracurriculars, then you get to that company that everybody says you should work for. And this might happen out of school. This might happen over time in your career. It's this like prepackaged path that people have in mind for you for what like success looks like. And I hope I emphasize that correctly because I'm doing air quotes. It's what success looks like.
You have to be very careful with the air quotes here.
As a podcaster, I've gotten to know how my voice interacts with the listener a little bit just as a creative tool. It's really cool as a writer to translate. But so anyway, so I'd worked at Google as a digital media strategist for a few years out of college, which basically just means I was an account manager for AdWords advertisers. And I hated it. I hated every second of the job. I loved the wrapper. I had very many great relationships there. I liked telling people.
I thought you meant like a rapper, like an actual rapper.
They actually,
like
what they don't tell you is actually one of the perks is they have an in-house, in-office rapper who introduces everybody when they arrive in the morning. It's really weird. So
gotcha.
I left because I'm more of a
rub you the wrong way.
Yeah, I'm more of an indie rock guy, so I had to get out. So I remember this one crystallizing moment I had. It wasn't the moment I left, but it was kind of a kick in the butt to tell me it's time to get out. I'd been working probably for 3 years, miserable the whole time. And I think I was miserable because my brain was not prepared for me to not love it. Because it was like the thing everybody said you should do, work for the reputable company. Like, here's the path. And I followed it and I was miserable. And other people around me in the same job weren't. So that was a big dose of realization. that your career is about self-discovery and self-awareness. It's not about doing what others say is best in general. It's about figuring out what's best for you. It's a little precursor to why I wrote the book that I wrote, because it's about that subject.
That's got a ring to it, kind of in a weird way, but I think a future book for you could be Miserable at Google.
Well, here's the thing. So I appreciate that. Great idea. Any residuals I'll give back to you. I assure you.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
I don't want to tear down companies. I like tearing down trends. I don't want to tear down people or companies. Let's fight for stuff instead of against stuff. That's kind of my gist right now. But yeah, I left Google essentially because I had this one moment. Somebody sent me a YouTube video and I was like obsessed with it. Can't remember what it was, but I remember watching it 5 or 6 times throughout the day. I went home to my roommates and hyped it to them. And right at the peak of their anticipation, when I hit play on the video, I saw a pre-roll ad for like a car company. And I had this really weird thought in my head, which was, damn it, Eric, because Eric was my colleague at Google that sold this advertiser this campaign. And then my very next thought was like, oh no, I have the same job at Google that Eric has, which means the result of my work is people being frustrated by an experience in their day. And like, that's not why I got into the workplace. That's not what I want to do with my life here on Earth. Like, we have finite number of minutes left here. Like, let's use them well. And so I realized I wanted to be the video, the thing people choose, the thing people like. The pithy phrase is, I want to make stuff people love, not try to make people love stuff. And so I quit. It didn't take long thereafter. It was like this one smack in the face. It's like, you dummy, you're staying here because you're worried something is wrong with you. And that's the reason you're here. That's the reason you're staying. It's because the narrative in your head is, well, everyone else says I should love it, so I must just need to stay and figure out my own issues. No, the problem was I was in the wrong job for me, and that's all your career is figuring out what's best for you.
How did you have that courage to say, hey, it's okay for me to leave this behemoth of a company that so many people are in love with?
I assure you, Max, it was not courage. I should have left probably year one. It took me 2 more years. So there's, one strike against the notion of courage at that point. And then the other was just the level, the depth of my unhappiness. I just remember being so distraught heading into work. Like, I just had, I had, what do they call, the Sunday blues or whatever. And then every day I would go in, I would have this knot in the pit of my gut and I couldn't do it anymore. I found myself acting like I did as a student in classes I didn't like, where I was good at figuring out the system to get the A, but didn't care about the material, didn't care about learning anything. So I found ways to game the system at Google to, we had different numbers that they would track about our call times with clients and all that stuff. And I found ways to game it so I could, get the good grade, which is in that case, the promotion or the raise. But I was doing everything for the wrong reasons. So I don't think I had any kind of courage there. I think that was a moment that taught me about self-awareness, but I really lacked it.
Okay, well, we'll give you 1 strike, but you're still in the batter's box here. So
okay, cool.
You're hanging in there. But you had the Sunday scaries consistently. You had the Monday blues. I'm sure there's like one for every day of the week.
Tuesday tremors, Wednesday
Wild
Wigglies.
Business Growth
No,
Wednesday. That's what it's called. But when you left Google, so that first day you stepped out of the office, or I guess the first day that you didn't go into the office, and realized, all right, now is my chance to put my life and kind of what I'm doing in the business world in a different direction. What else is going through your mind then? What are you planning? What kind of were your next aspirations after that?
You're giving me far too much credit, my friend, because I went to a startup that was building what they called gamified content. It was back when game mechanics and gamified experiences was all the rage. And I went to this startup that no one has ever heard of nor will hear of because they don't exist anymore. And I was employee number 12. I was still in sales, not marketing, not creating things, but I saw a line of sight to sort of like controlling my own fate a little bit more. And so what I was thinking was, I'm still in a job I don't like, but I have more control in this company. Not the best solution to my problems from Google. And what I realized was I was trying to leave something behind instead of go towards something. And I feel like that's a big issue with a lot of career changes is we often try to leave something behind and that makes the next thing we go into a little bit blurry in our mind. We don't see it as clearly as possible because we are so desperate to escape the now that we're really, really clouded in our judgment when we evaluate the next. And that was me. I did not like the next job I had. But as luck would have it, and this is the value of side projects, I was blogging incessantly on the side, as I'd done since college, and writing articles occasionally for the company blog at this new startup. And when they started to realize they overhired on the sales side, they got rid of everybody who had my job title except for me. And they said, why don't you run our content team? Which was me and me alone at the time. And I was like, I don't know what content is. I used to want to be a journalist. I know what editorial is. I know what writing is.
Your team must have been very hard to manage.
My team was the worst, Max, the worst. I mean, flighty, shiny object syndrome, no self-awareness, had come from this big company and thought he knew everything.
Already had one strike.
Yeah, still had one strike, but I was really close to giving this guy two right away. You know what I mean? Just to put him in his place a little bit. So I worked at that startup for a time, and it was a pivot point for me because it showed me two things. One is it showed me content as a career. And I ended up building a community group on the side that at the time was it started as drinks and coffees back when we could do such wonderful things. It started as I want to learn content as an industry so I can keep making stuff. It just so happens to be in the brand world, not what I thought I would do for a living, which was write for a newspaper in the sports section. And so it showed me that. It showed me content and the community I built around Boston with some friends over time. The other thing it showed me, though, which has stuck with me, is this is hidden, but it's everywhere in every choice you make in your career. Control and certainty are inversely proportional in your career. So in other words, if you want total control, you will have no certainty. If you want total certainty, you will have no control. So what you have to decide is, where along these spectra do I lie? What do I value of the two, or to which degree? So if I want total control, I should be doing what I'm doing right now, which is building my own business. But as the business starts to succeed and grow, and we're in this moment now where we're starting to hire, I have to cede some of the control in favor of some things feeling more certain. And so if you work for a giant organization and you have very little say, you have a lot of certainty. That's the benefit of being there. Don't be surprised when you don't have control. And that was me at Google. I felt like I wanted more control. The startup granted me that. And so now I'm starting to pick up on these different data points, and I'm like, aha, that's how I should make choices in my career. It's not about some grand aspiration. It's not about some logo that I work for. It's about pursuing what makes me happy and using that idea of like control and certainty. What do I value? To what degree? Okay, given that, what does this next choice present me with? Would I be happy if I make it?
It's a fascinating paradox there, because I think that's totally right. When you are at a bigger company, you don't have nearly as many levels of uncertainty. And so in a way, you can feel really, really safe, but I think it can also tend to make you complacent. Whereas on the other side of things, it's the complete opposite and bears itself to a little bit more of a roller coaster, but also much more potential upside. So it's a really interesting mix there. On that content note, there are, of course, more stops along your career that we could dive into and, go on for hours and hours. But I think the common thread as your career progressed was that you found that you had a knack for creating these crazy cool original narratives for B2B brands. So when was the first time that you realized that, hey, brands could actually have really compelling storytelling?
I don't know that there was like one moment where I realized that. I think it happened kind of like it happened for me in school as a writer. Like people would look at my work and be like, hey, you can write really well. And I would be like, really? Okay, cool. Like, I guess I should keep trying this. And I think that's a hidden benefit to a lot of people who are trying to pursue creative careers. And not everybody has it. And I'm grateful I did, which is that people around me, from my family to my teachers, would tell me at a young age, you're good at this, or good job. And just those things, with no added context after that, I think allowed me to find the courage and the confidence and the excitement to keep making stuff. And so that's, now I'm able to do that for a career. And so I think, it similarly, it happened to me in the business world where people would be like, hey, this is really good marketing. And I'm like, okay, cool. I like that I'm being complimented. I don't see it as marketing though. Like I'm just trying to write something. I'm trying to teach something in this article or tell somebody's story, or, I'm making this podcast because it makes me feel good to construct the story this way. And I think that means it'll make you, the listener, feel good. Or it's like, I don't want to sound like everybody else. And these very simple things that are kind of selfish, if you really hear me say them, people start to extrapolate out these grander, more strategic lessons to learn. And I think that that's just common in the marketing world, I guess. It's like the reason why marketers don't want to learn from a lot of journalists and videographers and directors and producers and hosts, which is really weird. They want to learn content marketing from other marketers, which is bizarre because they think there's something grander and strategic and more complicated about what they do. And it's really simple. It's, you try to find something that can hold people's attention because it holds yours. It excites you. You're curious about it, so you follow it. And then if you extract a grander lesson to make it a little bit more universal, you're kind of done. A story is only three things. It's a status quo, some conflict, and a resolution. But we try to conflate powerful experiences with complexity, and it doesn't need to be that way.
In the interest of unsuccessfully trying to make you seem more and more selfish, what do you think makes your narratives different than any other type of brand content you see out there? Thank you. That's a great answer. That's the answer I'm looking for.
I'm involved in my work and not someone else's. Period. This is why I have a real problem with best practices. It's why my book is about questioning best practices. It's, somebody can tell you do it this way, and that's fine. It only gets you so far. It's good enough. It's a faulty equation because the biggest variable that is present in your situation and no one else's is you. So I try to be, fully present in my work, which doesn't always happen. I think creativity is repetition plus reinvention. So it's the muscle memory of shipping a lot of work, a lot of which will be bad, but maintaining this intent that I want to improve. I want to be great eventually, or I want to do something well at some point. And so I have to get better the next time and reinvent and, keep doing that. And so I can't say what makes my work better because that's subjective. That's for the audience to describe. What makes my work different is, I think I like starting from a place of righteous indignation, maybe. Let's say that. Like you might say frustration about what's broken in the topic I'm exploring, the marketing world, or I just worked with a brand called Help Scout to do a documentary series. Before quarantine, we were out across the country at different cities doing like a travel style show about business where it started from a place of frustration, where the business success story is about winner take all monopolistic gains for the top few people, damaging to communities and teams and the environment. And so we think success needs to be redefined in the business world because we think businesses are powerful tools and have high leverage for change and positivity in the world. But the story of success, especially in America, in the business world, is profoundly broken. So there's the frustration. So now we need to find the better way. What's our vision for the better story? Let's go find the people who have those stories. Let's journey to figure this out. So I like constructing things like a journey, like something that we're trying to change from the status quo. And maybe that's a little bit of a unique trait that I have in some cases compared to some B2B content. I think I love wading into the feels. I really like getting emotional and not necessarily sappy, but the whole range, being silly and weird and quirky, being serious. One of my favorite TV shows ever was Scrubs, and they're really good at moving from comedy right into the emotion.
There's something about that dramedy space. At the time
it's the pivot.
Yeah, at the time we're recording this, my girlfriend Dana and I have been binging Shameless, and that is totally in the same vein of that. They just absolutely nailed the dramedy aspect there and the paradox between those two extremely different emotions that is just so compelling and can be heart-wrenching, but also put the biggest smile on your face.
Totally. I think the pivot between, because this is what comedians do really well. This is what storytellers are allegedly in the business of doing. This is what marketers should do better, which is you're building up some tension and then releasing it. And so like when you build up tension and release it, the release can come it's an emotion, but it doesn't need to be serious. It can be satisfying. It can be funny and uncomfortable. So like the pivot between You thought you had one kind of release and you thought the story had ended, and then actually no, there's this deeper lesson or a more serious moment on the back end. That's important. It's akin to a lot of podcasts, because that's a lot of what I do when I'm not making shows. I teach marketers to make shows, and a lot of shows that we find that are flat, they try to like summarize too much. They try to give you like the bulleted takeaways instead of create an experience that lets you really have to think critically and sit with an emotion or a thought. And that's when it really hits home. And so these dramedies do a great job of that. Or another example is Anthony Bourdain. He's my storytelling
Oh
idol.
my God. Yeah,
Unbelievable the way he gets that stuff, right?
he's made me, and I actually read his book, Kitchen Confidential, earlier this year as well. But
Oh, love it.
it would be a fun project, I think, a fun exercise, I think, for anybody would be, who would be your favorite people to interview all time, even if they're not around anymore. And Bourdain, I feel like, would be one of the best and most fascinating people to interview all time.
I completely agree. I also would see that as such a scary challenge, not only because I think a lot about him and his storytelling style and I've studied it and sit with it and read interviews and all that stuff. Like I'm immersed in his stuff even now, all the time. So it's hard not to feel like he's not a real person. So sitting with him back when he was alive would have been ridiculous. So, but he's also been out in the world a lot. So what is there left for him to have said in an interview were I to have gotten that chance? And I think this is actually the same, in a way, the same challenge that, Max, you maybe face. Like you've interviewed some folks I've heard of in the marketing world, other shows that talk about entrepreneurship, building businesses, business success, marketing success. You seem to have the same kind of like names tick through all these shows. So now the challenge becomes, and I think it's an exciting one, how do you construct a premise for your whole show and then have a process inside of each episode where you could take anybody. You could be like, you've probably heard Seth Godin interviewed before, but not like you've heard him on our show. And to me, that's the hallmark. It's like you've probably explored this subject before, but not like you've heard it from Bourdain or from Max or from Jay. Like this is, to me, the great creative challenge of
The
making a
famous,
show.
the Three Musketeers right there.
Bourdain, Max, and Jay. Yeah, of course. Like who doesn't put, if you have a Mount Rushmore, it's probably like, Bourdain, Max, Jay, and maybe a childhood hero of yours. Let's put Elmo on that.
Thank you. Yeah. But that is so spot on, because you're right. There are so many, let's just take the content marketing space, for example, and you're an example of this. There are some big names that are, more or less celebrities in the space. And it's really exciting when you get them on and like, oh my God, I have a podcast interview booked with, Jay Acunzo, with Jay Bear, with Ann Hanley, Mark Schaefer. When you see names like that and you have the interview booked, there's an extreme level of excitement there. It's going to be an awesome interview and episode regardless. But as you're prepping and listening to other interviews going through it, I'm thinking the entire time, okay, what can I do to be as different as possible from every other appearance that they've had? Because that's going to make for a more interesting interview, but it's also, from their standpoint, it's going to be a lot more fun for them.
Yeah, I find there's only three ways to do it. Just three. So one is your show having a premise, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people they say what we explore, but not how we explore it. And so like we have our second cohort of our workshops are live right now. The enrollment just opened in August. And one of the first lessons these students will get, and they're mostly marketers, some executives, some freelancers. One of the first lessons is how to actually develop a show's premise, because we think it's about picking topics when really it's more nuanced than that. It's about saying other shows, I'm acknowledging other shows cover these topics, but not like we do. And so finding that second part is really hard. So you can kind of pitch it to yourself or someone else using what I call the XY framework. So this is a show about X. Unlike other shows about X, only we Y. So this is a show about business success and success stories in business. Unlike other shows about business success, we challenge what the success story should even be and go on a journey trying to figure out, is there a better success story that is better for the community and the world than our current capitalistic nature? Right? It's like, okay, that sounds different. Or only we ask 5 questions alone every time to every guest. Right? And so there's all these ways that you come up with like this hook that you're saying to somebody, the thing you're familiar with and probably want to know more about. Cool. Well, we take a hard angle or have a conceit or unique way of looking at it. Come with us if that's interesting. And by the way, we can throw any guest against that and it'll be different because of the nature of what we're exploring. So the premise helps, the research helps, and then the format of your episode, like actually having a segmented style to your interview, which all the greats have, you just don't hear it. They just don't say, next section is the bio, next section is the backstory. They don't have these overt segments, but they have them on their notes, they have them in their minds. So actually having a structure to put that research to good use is important. So you get premise, you get guest research, you get an episode structure or format, and now you're differentiated in a really refreshing way.
What's your process look like from that standpoint? So when you are creating an original story, let's say there's a brand out there that gets in contact with you and says, "Hey, Jay, we'd love your help. Let's create something together that will truly do something for our business and truly have some remarkable storytelling as part of it." How do you go about this? Like, is it broken into kind of a research and prep phase and then you get into production? Like, what does that look like from your angle?
Yeah. There's like a little bit of context or a lens that you need to look at the podcast, look at the show development, even if it's not a podcast. Once you have that lens, now you can see clearly what the real challenges will be and attack those challenges in order. So the lens is, and this is the first thing we say to our students, is that, you are not here to learn how to make a podcast. You're here to learn how to make a difference. You want to make a difference for your career. You want to make a difference for your company. You want to make a difference for your community, for the people you want to serve. Just so happens that the way you're going to be making a difference is through a podcast. So how do we use a podcast to make a difference? That is the first most important thing. And so what we can't do is create a show that would be better off as a bulleted list of takeaways. Right? The point is not for someone to acquire information. The point is for them to want to spend time with you. The experience itself has to be the value. Not like most business shows in particular. Most business shows, they're better off doing, and I always say the best case scenario for a business show is they don't need it because they already know that information. The next best case is they have one of those chairs from the movie The Matrix where they can like plug a little thing in the back of their brain and download it,
Yeah.
right? Then the next best case is ask a friend, then follow a checklist, then read an article, then listen to your show, then just give up and not learn it at all. So if your show is right next to the option give up, it's pretty clear you need to come up with a better premise because you're too narrowly focused on like, here's a bulleted list of takeaways. It just so happens to be 45 minutes of talking, right? Nobody wants that. So the acquisition of knowledge is not the point. The experience is. So that's the first thing we say to people.
Somewhere we're going to need to get our hands on these Matrix chairs because I think that's some technology that's just been lagging there.
I got to say, Max, like you're getting me excited and I'm rambling a little bit because you are asking me questions I don't get anywhere else.
That means a ton. I get now I'm blushing and I have air quotes just to continue things that you can't see over podcast form. But that means a lot. I really try to do that. And so that's kind of the early lens phase, as you said, to producing these stories. How much work goes on up front before you're actually recording to making sure that this actually comes through smoothly versus more on the post-production side and when you're editing in music and VO and all things like that?
The process up front is so crucial. I mean, the we'll fix it in post is such a myth. And so there's, that show is just the combination of three things. These things are present in every show. The question is if you've proactively cultivated them or not. And so obviously if they're going to be present anyway, if the listener will make sense of it in their own way, you're better off being proactive and actually cultivating these things. So the three things are the premise. I mentioned that before. It's not just what you explore, but it's how you explore it, which gives the listener a reason why they should care. So you have this premise that you develop. It's the articulation of, it's the story of your show, not in your show, right? It's like, you could see a scenario where one of my favorites is in the coffee industry, there's a company called Death Wish Coffee. They're the world's strongest coffee. Death
Which
Wish
is a
Coffee.
hell of a name, by the way. That's
hell
like,
of a name.
You could not have a stronger name than that.
Right? Hell of a name. And you cannot have stronger coffee, apparently, than theirs. That's their whole shtick. So you could see a scenario where if there's a lot of podcasts they're competing with for theirs, they would all be like general coffee news and analysis and interviews with coffee insiders and fans. That's what I'd call like a transactional show. It is the generic, it is the meandering, it is better off being an article or a bulleted list or knowledge you can download straight to your brain with futuristic tech. That's the typical show. What they do is more transformational than transactional. They created something called Fueled by Death Cast. So Fueled by Death is very evocative, very provocative, but they have this awesome tagline or description, which is, we're all fueled by death. The idea that we want to leave this world a little different before we inevitably leave it for good. And on their show, they're talking to people about how they're trying to do that. So you might have heard these people before, Olympians, business leaders, but not like you've heard them on this show, because this show is really about legacy. This show is really about, you're going to die. How does that change your work? How does that change your day to day? By the way, we have coffee that we want to fuel you to do this stuff. But in the story of the show, we're talking about the premise. So they have a real premise. And then you have your episode format and your talent. And those are the second and third pieces: premise, format, and talent. And so that's the next step, is you really have to strategically cultivate, write about, and develop those things and create some content around those things in order to make a show that's really, really great, such that you don't have to save it in post.
So there's kind of the three musketeers of the production side of things. What's the biggest piece of advice that you have for anybody who aspires to create awesome stories, whether it be for their personal brand, for the company they work for, or for other companies?
Find the tension, find the conflict. A lot of people are out there telling what they think are stories that really fall flat because they're saying things like, I read a piece the other day about a YouTube channel I admire, and they were talking to the creators and the founders of this team, and they have like 11 million subscribers now. And the story was basically like, here's the idea that they came up with and why they wanted to do it. And it was difficult to get viewers for a while, but now they have millions of views per video, a small agency, and these illustrious clients like X, Y, and Z. And I was so revulsed by that type of storytelling, and it's rampant. And I'm sure I'm guilty of it too. And it runs like this. They wanted to do a thing. It got hard right here, but then they got past it and now everything's great. Let's talk about how it's great and how you can be great too. The problem is you're skirting where the story actually is, where the lessons are, where the emotion is, which is in the conflict, in the struggle, in the hard. And we don't want to wade into that stuff. But if you look at any story you admire, that's where they live. They don't skip it, they live in it. So that's my advice: is you don't have to be sensationalist. You don't have to find some world-changing story, but in the tiny moments too, look for conflict, questions, moments of uncertainty. If it is something that you don't quite have on the surface, that's where your follow-up questions need to come out, because people aren't going to willingly give that stuff if you're interviewing them all the time. But if you can just, everything you're doing, whether it's a tiny little blurb or an article or a giant show or something bigger, just find the tension and make sure you resolve it afterwards. And that is a story. You will have such emotion coming through without really changing all that much that people can't help but feel it's irresistible.
Yeah, definitely. And tension is such an inherently strong thing. Like, it has a strong connotation. It's a very powerful thing that I think you can find in so many different stories out there. There's so many opportunities to highlight that. So I think that's amazing advice. And I want to call out something that you did as part of your Unthinkable podcast, which is awesome, by the way. We're talking about being different. I mean, I've never heard another podcast anything like it. So you've definitely excelled at being creative and breakthrough in that approach. I was listening to your episode about the Alchemist Brewery and Heady Topper, which continued the trend of drinks that have a strong reputation. Now I can safely say it is one of my favorite beers of all time. I didn't have it until within the last year, but had Chris Strub on the podcast previously, and he was just raving about Heady Topper. So the next time I went up to Vermont, I was fortunate to have it, and immediately, of course, fell in love with the beer. But then I heard your story and your episode where you actually talked to the founders of The Alchemist and heard their story and really uncovered that there's way more going on here than just a beer that people love and will even fly across the country to get. There's some real tension that they went through, and there's a real story of their brewery, and it's part of how they've got to where they are. And so you nailed the tension in that example, and I would just kind of wish I had like a lifetime supply of Heady Topper right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, they have an incredible story, and I think I actually ran that as part of season 3 of Unthinkable, which is a project, by the way, that is always plaguing me because I never feel I'm doing enough, and it goes on hiatus for big periods of time. But yeah, so that show is a gift and a curse at the same time. But I appreciate the kind words. The punchline to that story, and I think the reason you maybe wanted to bring it up was they had a very obvious conflict and tension, which is that their brewery in Vermont was flooded. So the show drops you into that. The episode, the way we produced it, or I think the way I produced it, because I think at that point I was still working solo on that show, was to start you in the conflict, start you in the tension, in the heart, and live there for a moment. And now I have your permission to keep talking, because you're like, I have all these questions, or I have this unsatisfactory feeling that there's no resolution to this tension yet. Please keep going. I'm interested. I'm hooked. But then later I have to then draw it out to a more universal thing, because not everybody is thinking about a brewery flooding in their work, and the show is supposed to help you change something in your work, right? Like, what will be different when you stop listening? I don't want to just be a distraction. I want to help. I want to provide value to the listener. And so then we have to kind of step back, and or maybe zoom out is a better way to phrase it, to the universal, right? And so what we talk about in that is how often we try to make some kind of grandiose excuse for why we're doing our work. It's about results, it's about growth, it's about optics. We want to be bigger and faster and better, but sometimes just doing the thing and having a business that allows you to do the thing that you love, that's enough. And any growth over the top is gravy. And that's what we titled the episode, Gravy. And we have a great quote at the end that cements that from one of our guests. So the conflict has to unfold in two places. It can't just be this story. You have to let the audience see themselves in that story. And if it's not super obvious, you might have to give it to them a little bit more overtly.
If you have a business that you love, everything else is gravy. Now, what if that gravy could come about via podcast? That is what I can help you with. So I'm here to sell you I'm not here to sell you gravy. I am here to help you with the podcast you've always wanted. I can help you with the 3 P's of podcasting. That is planning, production, and promotion. Email me at max@hippodirect.com to take care of the behind-the-scenes work, the editing, the production of your podcast, so you can focus on interviewing your guests and, of course, running your business. Email me at max@hippodirect.com to bring your podcast to life and perhaps even some gravy. Now, back to the amazing Acunzo. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get into inspiration and creativity. So you are clearly a very creative thinker and creative creator or maker, whichever term you prefer. What do you do to stay creative?
I learn by doing. I don't know that people learn different ways. That's just a realization I've had about myself is I learn by doing. So a lot of tinkering, a lot of side projects, usually starts with a really crappy logo that I create in PowerPoint of all places. I like to just try stuff and see how it makes me feel or how others react to it. Really good example is very early Unthinkable, trying to sit with Anthony Bourdain's TV show and figure out what his rundown was. Like, did they have a rough formula? A block had to cover this type of thing, and B block, and C block, etc. I took away some really valuable insights from that. Trying to figure out what the people I admire do, like why I'm inspired by their work. Not just who am I inspired by and can I copy it? That's very useful too. But why am I inspired by their work? Like, what are they doing to make this work? Can I put an X-ray lens over that? And then make a lot of stuff. And I think honestly that part, because it's how I learn, I tripped into something that was really powerful, which is that a lot of people want to create stuff. So they gather up the tools and the knowledge and pick people's brains and ask people for coffee or digital meetings. And they go through the motions of what my friend calls success theater, right? They want to look the part or sound the part or gather knowledge because it feels like work, but actually they never do the work, which sounds pithy to say. But when you start to get into the business of teaching, like I am now, I'm like, oh my gosh, half the battle here is just, you just need to do more of this. You're either frustrated because you're looking at someone who's done it longer, thinking you can't do that when they're on step 1,000 and you're on step 1, or you think that there's some insight. You think there's some thought or tech that if you know it or buy it will make you good at this. But the only way to get good at this is just be bad at it for a while, but keep doing it. And that's it. It's just practice. So to me, that's like the way I try to stay inspired and get better is just start practicing and hope that I'll find something in there. The idea, the skill, the turn of phrase, the sound that comes through in a little moment of a podcast, even if the rest gets thrown away, there's something in there that leads to the next thing, even if it's on a different project. And so I'll end by saying this. Everything is practice for the next thing. There's only one project. It's your body of work. So you have to start shipping.
I like that metaphor. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. I wrote it down so I make sure I got this formula, this very complicated formula correct. Repetition plus reinvention. That's basically what you said creativity comes down to. And you also, it ties closely to this idea of muscle memory from a creative standpoint. Can you expand on muscle memory from the creative lens a little bit more?
It's the difference between I'm consciously thinking about the actions I'm taking right now as I'm taking them, like the little director voice in your head is active, and I'm just doing it because it's what feels natural. So a really easy example from my career comes from public speaking, which has always been a big part of my solo journey. So for the last 4 years, a lot of public speaking helped fund the business I'm building in marketing showrunners, helped fund a couple of shows too, which has been really, really fun. So, but anyway, so when you perform, you do have this voice in your head that's like, oh, that joke landed really great. I'm going to lean into the laugh. Or like, it's not working. Or they seem distracted, or the story's not hitting, or I'm going on too long. But when you rehearse a lot in your room as if to a crowd, when you record yourself and watch it, you start to just internalize everything. It sounds like a nice idea. Making is a muscle, etc. But also, if you look at the science, it's the neural pathways of your brain, like connecting and I forget the term. Somebody in your audience is screaming because they know it. It's this fatty substance that kind of forms around different pathways. There's literally something physical going on in your brain when you practice. And that's what makes somebody who's in the NBA shooting a jump shot feel like it's natural, feel like it's automatic, because they've wired their brains to do that. So if I want to do a new speech, it's not actually about the performance or the gig, it's about the rehearsal and making it internal to me. And so not only am I up there in the moment, because I don't have to consciously think about each next move, I can then customize it. I can react. And so this happens when I'm interviewing somebody on a podcast. This happens when I'm performing in front of a camera or on a stage. This happens when I'm teaching stuff in our workshops. Like, the more you do it, the better you are. And it's not just about this like analogy that making is a muscle. It literally is physical. And so but that only happens with practice.
Right now, somebody is literally screaming the term fatty substance.
Yeah, whatever it is, they're inserting the phrase here. And then they're like, what? Someone down the hall is like, what are you doing?
Of course. That was the whole goal of this podcast, just to get somebody to shout something random like that. It's crazy when you think about it, the idea of it actually having ties to being a muscle. You clearly have this ability to be very analytical and dive really, really deep into different topics or subject areas. Where does this analytical nature come from?
I don't know. I can hazard a guess, though. I don't know because
That's
it just
okay.
feels like me. But the guess I have is from my parents. So my father's a software engineer. He's incredibly analytical. We jokingly call him Sheldon once in a while in homage to the
Bazinga.
character Bazinga from the Big Bang Theory. Exactly. He has very many shirts with quotes from Sheldon on it.
Does he have the actual Sheldon shirt?
He doesn't have that. That should be
The
our
lightning
next
bolt
gift,
thing?
though. That's a good
Oh,
one. We should
Flash,
give it
right?
to him. Yeah. He has a shirt that says, if I was wrong, don't you think I would recognize it? Or don't you think I'd know if I was wrong? Or something like that, which is a quote from the show. But anyways, he's a classic software engineer. My mom is a preschool teacher, and she's wildly creative and very intuitive. And they used to tell me, recently when I started to joke, hey, I'm running creative projects and a creative business, but one of my advantages, I can also think rationally and plan, and I can tie big human ideas and emotions to the logical business case. Like, this seems weird. I'm glad I can do it. And so this story came out from them when I would tell them this, that when I was a kid, apparently I would create these like elaborate stories out of my Legos and like build these crazy looking flying cars and have all these characters. But I would very neatly line them up in a row. And when one got out of order, I would like very specifically focus on that one piece or character getting back into a row or something. And they would see this and they'd look at each other like, oh no, like both of us are warring in this child's brain. So if I had to guess, maybe that's where it comes from.
This is speaking to my OCD tendencies, because if anything is even a millimeter offline, I think it has to be right back in line for the organization standpoint. But also,
I love that.
there's some beauty in chaos when it comes to creativity. So there's some of both sides there.
I think to me, the chaos is not knowing something's going to work unless my process is chaotic. Like the chaos being, I'm going to ship this into the ether and it's no longer mine to own and understand. It's now up for debate. Or like, I have no idea if this is actually going to hit. That to me is good chaos. The bad chaos comes when you're like just brute forcing everything in your career, which was early unthinkable for me. And I burnt out hard. And I worked under a guy by the name of Andrew Davis, which if he hasn't been on your show, he should totally be on this show.
Yeah, aka Drew Davis, right?
Drew Davis,
Same person, two names.
Yep.
Yeah, he was on pretty early actually, but
Oh, good.
If you are listening, if you haven't checked out episode 100 yet, towards the end there's a blooper that I missed. Let's just say the word that came out of my mouth when I was interviewing him was very explicit. It made it into episode 100, but not the original Drew episode. But I'll always think of that when I think of Drew. So anyway, back to Andrew.
He's great, and so Drew now he's a good friend. He started out as a mentor, and he took me under his wing to learn the speaking business, both the onstage stuff and the behind the scenes business stuff. And he taught me how to be a systems thinker and appreciate the creative craft as a collective series of steps you take and can replicate and improve. This idea that process holds you back. No, bad process holds you back. Red tape holds you back. Unnecessary politicking holds you back. Process, though, can be very powerful. And so like great showrunners have a rundown or run of show. Great writers understand what a nut graph is and how to turn a phrase. And, great storytellers understand the arc of a narrative and the hero's journey. Structure and process really, really help unleash creativity because you become like a master. I don't know why I'm so focused on the Matrix, but here's my second Matrix analogy for you.
Go for it. Love it.
It's like at the end of the Matrix when Neo sees the code, right? He's like, oh, I get it. It's just a bunch of little parts and pieces and I can control them, right? They don't control me. I see it for what it really is. Now I'm a master of this domain. That's how you feel when you understand the system or the process underneath creativity. And so Drew really helped me see that too.
And that is why I learned to code. The end of that movie. No, not really. So let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
It's the best thing you've ever heard. I know it goes with your indie rock phase. Anyway, Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a brand or campaign, really in the creative marketing space, that caught our attention. And there's something with Lessonly that stood out to you. Do you mind sharing what came across you there?
Sure. So Lessonly sells internal training and development software for customer support teams and sales teams. So they're a B2B software company out of Indianapolis. And I've gotten to know the team over the years. They're incredibly thoughtful about helping people do better work, which is their big thing, is do better work. Their CEO, Max Yoder.
Fantastic CEO.
Right? Fantastic. Just the first impression he makes, Max Yoder.
Yeah, just like the first three letters.
Unbelievable. So he wrote a book called Do Better Work. And so that's their philosophy. And their platform helps internal teams do that. The show, they just launched a podcast, which I wanted to shout out because this could have been interviews with people who are in corporate learning and development, who are in sales training roles, who are in HR. But what they did instead was exactly what more of us should be doing, which is they decided we want to both own a concept in the market outright and also explore it more deeply and help people change their behavior around it for the better. So what they did was they launched a podcast called Practice First. And it aims to help people, very appropriate to our conversation here, Max, practice better to do better work. And so they don't talk just to experts in their field. They talk to Olympians and chefs and sommeliers and all these different, very diverse array of people to understand the value of practice in the workplace. Because sure, it makes sense that an Olympian would practice, but how do those lessons translate to being in sales, being in customer support, doing a white collar knowledge-based job at a corporation? And what I love about this is they aren't just trying to make a podcast. They're trying to make a difference. It just so happens to be audio. And they own that theme by doing so. And so you can see a scenario where they write the book about practice and have an event or a webinar series or articles or a newsletter. Like, what they've done is create brand IP that is defensible, not just yet another podcast doing yet another thing that all their competitors already do. I love it. It's a proprietary, original, refreshing journey they want to take you on, not a commodity show.
I love that. That's so cool because when you're thinking about starting a podcast for your brand, obviously you need to have some sort of tie back to your business if you want to see results to it or any sort of difference from the business standpoint. But they're living proof that by no means does it have to be, hey, you're just talking to your clients, or hey, you're just talking to people doing exactly what you're doing. You could talk to Olympians, you could talk to astronauts, you could talk to people in completely different lines of work, but pull out the common thread or thing that's relatable back to the key thing you offer. And it all ties back to making a difference from that standpoint. So that's an awesome example. What is it about their approach to practicing, like this focus on practice? What have you learned from taking in their content or just learning about this campaign? What's a key takeaway about this theme of practice that you think is so crucial?
Well, I mentioned owning that theme. That's a competitive advantage. But I think for the listener, for the audience, for the people they want to serve as a business, they're kind of like, I call these the 3 Ps of a transformational experience. And they have all 3.
I've got some 3 Ps as well, but yeah, we'll
Nice.
save that for a separate time.
So their 3 Ps are this. So the experience must be proprietary. So they are positioning it as a journey. Like, hey, we help people practice as a business. We have a lot of questions, however, about what it takes to be great at practicing. Join us on this journey as we help you transform how you practice so you can do better work. That's a proprietary experience. If somebody else interviewed experts in their domain and they did the same thing, nobody's going to be like, oh, you guys copy each other. But if somebody else tried to position their show or newsletter or blog as a journey to understand practice, now it's like, wait a second, that's an owned thing from Lessonly. It's proprietary. So the experience must be proprietary. The creator must be fully present. So often a lot of people are more journalistic or they're curating content, and that's okay as a starting point. You want sound reporting and facts, but on top of that, you also want to have a point of view and a personality come through. And so their co-hosts, Ben and Connor, are their director of marketing and their co-founder, respectively. And they are fully present. They have a point of view. Hey, practice really matters, and here's how to do it. So the creator's fully present, which gives them that defensibility too, because they're not present anywhere else. And the last P is the connection that people feel must be personal. So much goes into trying to make relevant content. That's table stakes. If you're not relevant, you don't even exist to the people you're trying to serve. The best that gets you is a glance your way. What gets people to walk over to you and stick and stay? It has to feel personal. It's not great. It's favorite. It's my personal pick for this purpose. So when the experience is proprietary, the creator is fully present, and the connection they engender with people is personal, to me, that's a transformational experience. That's what gives this show the qualities necessary to be somebody's favorite and to be irreplaceable, instead of yet another show talking to yet more experts.
I'm digging the 3 Ps. And let's go from the 3 Ps to 3D. I know you have another example of something that is a bit different and kind of is almost a contrarian view or a different view of how we can approach taking in stories from brands or not brands.
Right. This is not a branded example, but it's something a lot of marketers from big corporations and small entrepreneurs alike, we should be taking cues from outside our echo chamber, because these are the world-class people at this. There's an author by the name of Neil Pasricha, who I've gotten to know over the last few years. And he launched in 2008, one of Apple Podcasts editors' top picks for best new shows. It's a show called 3 Books. Now, I host a podcast dissecting other podcasts called 3 Clips, very much an homage to 3 Books. What Neil is trying to do is he's trying to figure out the world's the 1,000 most transformative books in the world. And the way he's doing that is he's talking to people that he admires, a lot of big names, as you might imagine, David Sedaris, Malcolm Gladwell, Judy Blume, Seth Godin. He's talking to these people about the 3 books that transformed them the most. And why, right? So he does a little bit of a read ahead of time. He tees it up with you like, we're on this journey. Remember, we're trying to find the 1,000 most transformative books. And every single guest brings forth their 3. So that's an episode format because he introduces the guest, a little bit of banter, book 1, analysis, book 2, analysis, book 3, analysis, and then he has a conclusion. He has structured the interview to be refreshingly different. But the very premise of the show, again, those first pieces of show development are the premise and the format. The premise of the show necessitates that you can squeeze anybody through that filter and it'll be an original interview. Like you've heard Seth Godin before, not like you've heard him on 3 books. And then the talent, Neil, he is fully present. He is somebody who's genuinely on a journey to figure out these books and you're with him along the ride. Like to me, and Lessonly has a piece of this, but Neil's is overt. Neil's literally numbered it, and to me, that's what we need to do more of. Not, I'm the expert, I have the answers, or I have the connections. It's, I'm curious. I think something's broken and needs to be fixed, or I want to explore and understand something more deeply, and I have questions. I'm the investigator and the guide. Come with me. And that makes somebody more of like a visionary or a worthy partner in a show than it does, I'm the VP of this and I know all the answers and I'm the influencer and here's all my advice. And so Neil embodies all of these things, the premise, the format, and the talent in such a way that the show could be someone's favorite show, which is the entire point of what we're doing.
There's something so wonderful about that world of curious. Like it really has endless possibilities. And I think it's such a fun space to be in from a storytelling standpoint. And when I had this wonderful segue where I said 3D, clearly I meant 3 book. At least I got the first half right.
Well, no. You did it. You nailed it. I'm going to save you. 3D. We're going from the digital world to the physical of books.
Ooh,
huh?
Yeah, of course.
Maybe?
That's what I meant.
I guess there are ebooks, but
I'll give it to you. I'll save you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I appreciate it. So let's get to the unusual. Think about pet peeves, quirks, and weird talents. Jay, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh God. Where do I begin?
I'm gonna limit you.
Sure. My biggest pet peeve is when people keep asking to review ideas, but they haven't created anything yet. And I get this from friends all the time. I get this from people that connect with me online, and I'm very grateful for their support for my work. And then they're like, hey, I have this like content plan for my personal platform, or I have this side project idea, or we have this show idea. And my overture to them is like, I'm so excited you're thinking about this. Please share with me the pilot. Please come back when you have 10 of these. Please let me know, because you're going to learn way more. My ideas are not worth anything. Like this self-discovery that you're on to learn the craft and your relationship to it and the world and your audience, this idea that you can kind of talk your way into the thing being great is ridiculous. Like ship. It's I interviewed once the head of creative at Dollar Shave Club right after they got bought. And he said to me, what did he say? He goes, oh, people ask me about their project ideas. And I'm like, yep, sounds great. You should do it. And the next time I see them, I ask them, hey, that idea you told me about, did you do it? No? Okay, do it. And it doesn't matter what the idea is. Like, unless it's damaging to people, he's just saying, go try it. Like, that's all we're doing. It's all any of us are doing here is we're making stuff up. We're just trying stuff. And so don't come with an idea for review. Don't ask to pick someone's brain. Go and try a bunch of stuff. Find something very specific that is blocking you in the process of making. And then go ask somebody, hey, how do you handle this specific thing? And I promise you, you'll lead to, that'll lead to more breakthroughs for you than any generic conversation or feedback.
If you're constantly on that idea phase, then you're just spinning wheels, but you really need to break the wheel, as Jay Acunzo says, if you see what I did there.
$10 to you for plugging my book.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take $9.99. But how about quirks? Is there something that your family, maybe your daughter, calls you out for or makes a facial expression for that's a little bit quirky about your personality?
My daughter's 18 months, so everything is funny or weird to her, which is good because I'm trying to be funny and weird to her all the time. Quirks that I have, I'm a daydreamer. I drift off a lot. I'm in my head a lot.
That explains this whole interview.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's a big part of my personality.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's always fun. And then how about weird talents? Is there, you mentioned playing with Legos as a kid. Is there anything that you do that you're really, really good at, but it has no impact on your business? So like it could be something around the house, it could be a memory trick, anything like that?
I'm pretty decent drawing cartoons, actually.
Really?
Yeah, there was a period of time where I had my blog, my side project blog, just at jakanzo.com, and I was trying to do these little comic strips about the marketing world, and it didn't amount to anything but a couple people saying nice things and me having lots of fun. But I'm pretty good at taking animals and people and scenery and making it into little cartoons.
Nice. Nice. That's a great talent to have. So let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. Let's get wild. You spent some time as a sports writer. What was your favorite part about that phase of your life?
Trying to figure out ways to make things that have been picked over season after season, year after year, different. It's such a challenge. Like, people don't realize this. Yes, there's always, new records and different types of players and stuff, but it feels like the same story could be told over and over and over again. And actually trying to find differentiation and white space there is really, really interesting. And I think that's what taught me about creativity, because sports are such contained, constrained things. You have set rules and seasons and all these things, statistics that you track. People have seen it all before and heard it all before and read about it before. And how do you find something different? It's actually a really fun creative challenge.
That is fun. When you worked at Google, what was the coolest thing about Google's office?
It's so cliche, Max. I'm so sorry, but it was the free food. I mean, like, you could get a snack
Oh,
anytime you
so
wanted.
cliche.
It's become the thing everybody kind of points to. It's
Yeah.
like beanbag chairs, foosball tables, and food. I just left college, so they had something called the Google 15. So that was really cool. Honestly, the best part, far and away, and honey, I hope you're listening, is I met my wife at Google. So
Aw.
that was the best part.
See that? Jay's wife, you're more important than food.
Well, let's just move on.
I've said too much. All right. Do you set an alarm? And regardless of that answer, what time do you typically get up in the morning?
Yes, I set an alarm. Now we have a nanny share with my sister-in-law, so we have some childcare amidst this pandemic. So now I get up at 7. The alarm goes off at 7. The problem with that is my real alarm is my daughter, and she gets up whenever the hell she wants.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's the key differentiator there. What is your top speaking tip? Because to put it in perspective, your speaking career, I know previous year at Content Marketing World, you were rated the number one most favorite speaker among all attendees, which is incredible. So congrats on that. But what tip do you have on speaking?
It's a performance. Treat it as such. That means you have to be entertaining. That means you also have to rehearse your face off. That means you have to have ideas people wouldn't just prefer to get a downloaded checklist of. The way you think about it is, how do I maximize the unique medium that is speaking? You are a performer, whether or not you consider yourself a performer. Back to Drew Davis, he has this great analogy where think of this as like a bell curve that's inverted. So it starts high, it goes low, and then it goes high again. People say, I don't want to rehearse a lot because I don't want to sound rehearsed. Well, that's a sign that you haven't rehearsed enough, right? You start out sounding authentically like you. As you start to rehearse, the line dips down and you're in this doldrum where you sound like this weird, stilted, performed version of you. But if you keep rehearsing, you get to the other side where the performance goes up again and gets better, where you can just be on a stage, where like you are so gripping, so powerful, inspirational or funny, whatever your style is, that people are like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. Can I hire you next? That's really what the speaking business is. It's, can people in the room see enough value in your talk so that they hire you, so that the game can continue? It's not about internet fame. It's about, are you delivering on a stage? So if you treat it like a performance and all the things that entails, you will. If you treat it like presenting a bunch of slides or taking a blog post or ebook and putting it into slides, that's going to be really difficult to stomach.
That's awesome. I think it goes right back to practice. So this practice and repetition, rehearsal theme keeps coming up and up and up. And then what is your favorite cartoon character or animal to draw?
Oh, wow. To draw, I have this little guy that I don't know. I just make him up. but a little cartoon guy. It always starts with these bulbous eyes and a bulbous nose and a smile and spiky hair. I have no name for him. He's turned into different animals over the years too. It's like the same face with different features. I don't actually have like a name for the guy though.
I think the name is obviously Bulbous.
Max Bulbous, I think.
There we go. Just call it Max. Yeah, Max B.
I got excited because I thought you were going to ask me for what's my favorite cartoon of all time.
You could
to
do
which
that
I would
too.
have
That's
answered
okay.
Calvin and Hobbes.
Well, Jay, this has been phenomenal. It's been like the amount of notes I've taken throughout this interview and the amount I've looked up and thought and really dug into the topics that you're throwing around. It's just been crazy. It's been amazing chatting. I really appreciate you sharing everything and your time. Where is the best place for people to connect with you, to buy your book, anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, so right now my focus is squarely on the showrunner sessions, which are online interactive workshops that we're doing to help people make their audience's favorite podcasts. So these are built for people whose podcast supports their business. It is not itself your business, side projects included. So if you have this desire to make a great show, we do these several times a year. So that's been my square focus throughout the pandemic is delivering these workshops for folks online. And it's been great. Like the connectivity that we all feel is something we all really need right now outside of our work. And so to have that create shows that create a difference for other people who listen, it's been really fun because I don't love podcasting. I'm not like an audio nerd. I love teaching. I love telling stories. I love helping. And I think the best vehicle at our disposal right now happens to be to make a show. And it's never been cheaper. It's not about your budget. It's about what's between your ears. And so what we're trying to do is unleash people's voices and ideas into a show that helps them rally for change, whatever that looks like in your domain. So that's really, if you want to explore the best of what we're working on, you just go to marketingshowrunners.com and click the workshops link, or you can explore a bunch of our free content there too.
Fantastic. It's such a cool thing that you're diving into. So that's definitely an awesome thing to check out. And then last thing here, final thoughts. It could be a quote, it could be a line, you could do a visual, an oral drawing. That doesn't really sound right, but you can do a cartoon character line to send us off. Stage is yours. Go for it.
If you want really to make one positive change in your career that I think can go a long way towards creativity, towards results in your business, towards helping other people, realizing your own aspirations for your work, I'd think of it like this. We're living in the era of advice overload, and experts are flowing into our feeds constantly. So we're tempted to act like experts. Experts have the answers. They hand them out to people. And if you're not an expert, if you don't feel like an expert, it's tempting to say, well, what could I have to offer? And I want to end with that notion of curiosity and asking questions and not having the answer, but exploring them. I think that's what a great show is, but I think it's what great work is. And so the notion I'd end us on would be to stop acting like experts and start acting like investigators. The world needs more investigators who are thinking critically, refusing to accept the conventional wisdom, and striving for something better than the status quo. So stop acting like experts and start acting like investigators. And I think you'll be surprised where you go.
I'm going to have to investigate that. Thanks again, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Stuck the landing.
All right, let's get unstuck for a sec. Thank you, Jay, for sharing your amazing story lessons, tips, math equations, you name it. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also check us out on Good Pods, where you can find all the favorite podcasts your friends, family, and other favorite people are listening to. In addition, check out everything Hippo Direct has to offer at hippodirect.com, and make sure to say hey on your favorite social media platforms at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Branstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!